order or analyst order?
We have the reprint in front of us, so that'd be great.
Okay, great. Starting on page 6 of your reprint, this deals with the additional funding that is embedded into the per pupil foundation amount for purposes of providing education technology. And you can see this new language inserted here after line 6 by an amendment by Budget and Tax, which is stating an intent that these additional funds would be supplemental to any existing expenditures on education technology. And then to get some reporting on that, it creates, first of all, the school boards need to submit a report to the department detailing previous year spending on these 3 items: the digital devices, connectivity, and IT staff, as well as what percentage of their staff and students have these items. Then 1 month after that, the department would then compile that and submit that to the General Assembly. And then in order to be able to comprehensively look at the 24 reports, paragraph 3 says on or before September 1, 2021, the department should establish reporting requirements, common data definitions, and things like that. And then going along with this same amendment, I'll just mention it, it's quick. It's currently on page 38. Oh, never mind. That's a different one. So that's the amendment on page 6. Then if you turn to page 9, that's where a maintenance of effort provision is done, and I'll turn it over to Rachel.
Senator Crows, do you have a question on that first amendment on page 6?
So on page 6, so it's in order for these local boards to receive this, additional funding for digital, they are required, this is a new report they're required to?
It's simply a report. The funding is not in any way contingent on the submission of this data.
I don't understand.
So the funding is embedded in the per pupil foundation amount on pages 4 through 5. So this bill would already be in those years providing that funding to the school boards. So this is just saying you need to report on your spending for these types of things, A, to get a baseline, and then B, to see how that spending would, in theory, increase once they start getting this additional funding.
So you're saying the additional funds in lines, right under line 6, the additional funds provided in the target per pupil, these additional funds are specifically for educational technology? It's tied into that, and so in order to receive those additional funds, they need to, what report, I'm just trying to understand what the local boards need to do.
There are 2 different things. One is explicitly saying it's supplanting and not replacing in terms of the technology money. And then there's a second item which calls for a report to compile so we know how many kids have the devices and staff and how many have connectivity. I mean, the connectivity issue has sort of been a little softer on the 24 jurisdictions. So this calls for them to do a report to gather that data.
So we will know who, so for the future, we know where we still need to put resources for broadband and connectivity?
Correct.
Is that
Exactly.
the purpose? That is the purpose?
That is my understanding.
Is that the purpose?
That's my understanding of the sponsor's intent of this.
Who was the sponsor?
Well, that doesn't matter.
I just want to know.
It's a committee amendment.
If we're requiring additional report for the
I know,
locals, I'd
but-
like to know why.
Yeah, well, the language speaks for itself. I mean, we're dealing with a law, and the law says we want to, if you look at number 2, mid-page, percent of students, teachers, and staff with digital devices and adequate connectivity in their homes in accordance with the FCC standards for broadband. I mean, we're voting on the policy, not, the policy is pretty explicit. It's a report to gather that data.
Okay, that wasn't clear to me in the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, next amendment.
So that's on page 9 of your reprint, and I'll turn it over to Rachel.
Page 9 or page 15? The MOE is on page 15, isn't it?
Yes, you're right, Rachel. My apologies.
So are we on page?
We doing 9 or 15?
You're on page 15.
Okay. On page 15 of your reprint are amendments to the maintenance of effort requirement. The language after line 28, what this is doing is clarifying how the fiscal 23 maintenance of effort per pupil requirement will be calculated for fiscal 23. And the language below lines 20, how the escalator is being calculated to account for the declining enrollment in fall 2020 due to the pandemic. And so it is amended to use the September of 2019 enrollment instead. And then below that and onto page 16 is altering how the fiscal 23 MOE is being calculated for counties that are subject to the escalator in fiscal 22. There are 14 counties that are making below average effort in their education funding for their school systems. And under current law, those counties have to increase their funding by up to 2.5% per student. And for those counties, the language below line 7 will apply. And so the starting point is the fiscal 22 appropriation to incorporate the escalator that the counties are giving them in fiscal 21. And then it just repeats the calculation that we're using for all the other counties that is above in subparagraph 3 and multiplying it by the new calculation of the escalator that I described first. And that's the net impact on 10 counties. And then there's also language that was added on page 38 of the bill, a new section 8 that just allows the counties to use their federal funds, if allowed under federal law, to cover the cost of this maintenance of effort requirement in fiscal 23.
Okay, Rachel, let's go back and let's try explaining this in lay terms for this non-B&T committee in terms of the 14 counties below and the escalator. Rachel, we want to go back to 15 and 16.
Okay.
So I think we understand the bottom of 15 where you're using September 2019 for the MOE and not this past year. That's
Right,
correct?
because of the drop in enrollment because of kids not attending school.
Okay. Now, once again, on the next page, could you give it to us in MOE for Dummies?
Yeah. So what originally the bill was for fiscal 23, again, to avoid an impact due to the unintended impact due to the pandemic enrollment, the bill was essentially skipping over the fiscal 22 calculation and was using the fiscal 21 local appropriation. However, that inadvertently meant that the counties that are paying an escalator in fiscal 22 would not be required to pay it in fiscal 23, and that was not the intent. And that is not current law. And so that is what we're correcting for in subparagraph 4, to have the starting point be for those counties, fiscal 22, which incorporates what they're already going to be required to do for the upcoming fiscal year in the calculation for fiscal 23, because they build on each other. The 23 builds off 22.
So let me read it back, give it back to you. For the counties that are below, they generally have to start correcting that with a 2% or 2.5% addition in subsequent years. And as this originally came in, it gave them a free pass for 22 and started in 23, and we're taking that out. So they have to do their 2 or 2.5% starting in '22?
So they already had to do it in '22. They were inadvertently getting a free pass, which is one way to put it, in '23.
Okay.
And so this is correcting that for fiscal '23.
Got it. Okay. Senator Patterson.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry. I looked at you and then I looked at Senator Ellis and I said, I know Senator Ellis.
Yeah, I've been there recently, Mr. Chairman, so understand. Thank you so much. Rachel, there are two numbers that you mentioned that affected counties, and I heard a number affecting 14 counties, and I heard something else affecting 10 counties. Could you tell me what affected for 14 counties, and then what affected the 10 counties? And if you could tell me which counties those are, if you can, have a breakout of which counties are included in those 14 and 10 categories?
So, Stacy, why don't we go ahead and hand that chart out? I'm not sure, this might not be helpful, but it will show you the 14 counties and the 10 counties. So let me know when everyone has that.
In January, we had a briefing from the Anne Arundel County Board of Education on this general issue. In September, there were about 2,500 bodies less in September of 2020 for this school year, and their concern was that because state funding is based on a per-head basis, they'd actually receive less money from the state. Their request, as this bill is doing, is saying, let's use the 2019 level for the head count. And when they analyzed the 2,500 students who were not showing up, quote unquote, at the school door, a significant number of them are homeschooler, a smaller percentage went to private school, and about 6 kind of dropped off the grid. This is important information because I'm sure Anne Arundel County is an example of all the counties in the state where parents have decided to park their child on the side for a period of time until the new normal occurs. So I'm very much in favor of the concept that's in front of us.
Right, Senator, and we're going to come back to that. But a large number are kindergarten and pre-K, because once you're in the system, you're in the system. But for kids who are just entering, and you didn't have a local school to go to because they aren't in the system yet,
Yeah.
and they didn't have a place to go for a lot of these people.
Right. Anne Arundel County didn't bring that up, but it's a very valid point. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, back to Senator Ellis's question about the 14 below counties.
So everyone should have the chart, and so the first column of the chart is under the bill is introduced. Again, we're talking about fiscal 23 maintenance of effort requirement. The bill specified that the starting point would be the fiscal 21 local appropriation. The second column shows the 14 counties that in fiscal 22 under current law are making below average effort and are required to increase their appropriation under the escalator by up to 2.5%. Those are the 14 counties, and so one of the amendments says the starting point for those counties will be fiscal 22 appropriation, not the fiscal 21 appropriation. Then the fourth column is the net, and there are 10 counties that have amounts in that column that are above zero, and those are the 10 counties that in fiscal 23 will need to increase their maintenance of effort due to this amendment. Although for most, if not all of them, without pandemic enrollment drop, they would actually have expected to put in more in fiscal 23 than what they will do now. So those are the 10 counties. So you can see Allegheny, Anne Arundel, Cecil, Garrett, Kent, Queen Anne's, Somerset, Washington, Wycomico, and Worcester.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Rachel. You anticipated my question and came well prepared. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And again, people need to understand, in another part of the original bill, not in the amendments, the rolling average for enrollment, the September 30th count, had already taken out the pandemic year. So people were not going to be penalized for their foundation based on those numbers. That wouldn't drag them down. Senator Carosa.
So the enrollment number, as I understand it, for 2019 on page 15, that was to accommodate the COVID-19 impact, and that was at the request of many of these local school systems. Is that correct? Because they contacted us about their concerns about enrollment.
It wasn't necessarily, I mean, I know that there are school systems that were concerned about this, but it really was when the bill was being drafted to be introduced, not an inadvertent error in not realizing that by starting with the fiscal 21 appropriation, we would be excluding or giving a free pass, as Senator Pinsky put it, the counties that are having already to put in more in fiscal 22. They would not be required to continue to do that in fiscal 23 under the bill, and that is not how current law works.
So on the handout,
Really correcting a drafting error.
so on the handout where it says proposed amendment, and it's the one column's 22, and the one column's using FY22 wealth for FY23. Are these numbers new numbers for these counties that are part of the 10 that have to contribute?
So fiscal 22 wealth is the normal, is what's always used for this calculation. The only difference there is using the fall 2019 enrollment. So prior to this bill, the counties would have anticipated, the below average effort counties would have anticipated that they would be subject to the escalator, which is capped at 2.5%. It's the highest amount is 2.5%. So I don't, it shouldn't come as a surprise to any of them.
And does using the 2019 enrollment help the local situation?
Rachel, did you hear the question?
Yeah, help the situation for the school system?
And I think they were
Reduce the
concerned.
liability, I think is what she's saying. Does using the 2019 FTE reduce the liability?
Not, so there's an impact on the counties and there's an impact on the school systems, okay? And they're not, they're not the same. So so using the fall 2019 enrollment, otherwise, if we use the fall 2020 enrollment, because of the way the escalator calculation works, it would be 0% for every county, regardless of whether they make a below average effort or not.
Which is why we're using the 2019 numbers.
Exactly.
Okay.
And let me just add, under current law, under the Kerwin bill, fiscal 23 is the last year for the escalator. So it will not exist after fiscal 23. That was the recommendation of the Kerwin Commission, and that is what was enacted into law.
Okay, is there one more amendment?
There is.
Let's go to the third amendment.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's hard for me to look to my right.
Fair enough.
It's Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rachel, Ms. Heiss, can you just talk about some of these counties, every county is feeling the fiscal stress and strain due to the pandemic. There is federal and state money that has been going now to the locals. Can you just address what's going to be available to help these counties pay for the escalator and pay for this amount due to support their kids?
Sure, yeah, exactly, and that is why on page 38, section 8 was added to sort of remind the counties that they do have this additional federal funding relief. The amounts that I'm looking at total over $1.7 billion that the counties are receiving in COVID-19 funding relief.
And you're referencing federal or state or both?
That federal.
Okay. And then in addition, there's some state relief that affects random stuff.
Yes,
not
the
as
Relief
directly.
Act provisions. Yes.
Right. So, okay. So I think that's important to get that word out there, that this isn't an unfunded mandate. You're getting funds, and therefore we really want you to help your kids learn and step up, and that's all part of this package. And funding came in a different gift, I guess. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's also important to understand, maintenance of effort is to ensure that all of this new state money, even prior to Kerwin, is not supplanting the local effort.
Right.
And it's apples to apples. It's every jurisdiction has to maintain some level of effort. And if they try to do it on the cheap and take the state money but not put any money from their own coffers, that's going to be under the spotlight. That's what maintenance effort's all about. So it's a formula. It's not addressed to one county or a specific county. It's a policy question with a formula. Okay, let's go to the last amendment.
Okay, that's on page 28 of your reprint, at the top of the page. So this is in the context of the community schools program. Current law, which we're bringing in here, C1 and 2, requires MSDE to have a director of community schools in order to assist coordinating that with the counties. Paragraph 3 here was added up in B&T that says, in addition to funding that's provided for that director position, which there is money in the budget for that, the governor shall include an additional $100,000 so that the director can provide training, technical assistance to the community schools and for additional staff. Page 28.
There's on the left side is a full page. On the right side, there's one line. We're looking on the left side, number 3, about a third of the way down. Now flip over. The original 28. Yes.
Bill page 28 of 38.
Okay.
28 and 38 says line 6, this is 28.
You have a craziness.
Yeah, it's like 27, 27 and a half, and then 28.
It says 28 of page 38 in the top right corner.
Turn over one more page. I mean, they keep the same page numbers of the bill, and if there's more text, they sort of like jerry-rig it inside, but they need to maintain the page number. So we're all there. It's now left-hand side. It says 28 in the upper left-hand corner. We're looking at number 3. It's adding $100,000, which is actually the amendment Senator Washington had day before yesterday for the statewide director to have more money for training or additional staff. Every community school has a coordinator. This is for the statewide person to give an extra $100,000. Okay, we have those 3 amendments that B&T, who has the financial side of this to look at, have come up with. Personally, I don't think they changed the intent of the bill or the policy of the bill. Is there a motion to adopt, concur with the B&T amendments? Vice Chair has moved. Is there a second? It's seconded. Discussion, Senator Carrozza.
Just going back to that third amendment, the one on page 28, the virtual school shall follow the quality online education standards. Was that added by V&T, or I wasn't?
No.
That was one of our last amendments 2 days ago.
So what was the new V&T amendment?
Number 3 on page 28. About a third of the way down, in bold, italicized, underlined, it adds $100,000 to the statewide director of community schools for training and for staff. Senator Riley.
I'd like to just remind Senator Carozza what happened was Senator Washington offered it, and we deferred and sent the amendment to B&T for their review first. So we never voted for it at this committee until today. But it was submitted, discussed, and deferred, and now it's back. And that might have caused some confusion, but it's the actual Washington amendment that she proposed to all of us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Let's do a roll call. This is on the adopt/concur with the B&T 3 amendments, and because we've already passed the bill.
Senator Kagan?
Aye.
Senator Lamb?
Yes.
Senator Hester?
Yes.
Senator Ellis?
Yes.
Senator Gallion?
Yes.
Senator Carozza? Yes. Senator Riley?
Yes.
Senator Patterson?
Yes.
And Senator Penske?
Yes. Senator Simon Ayer had a meeting with the governor this morning. He said, can he vote if it doesn't change the outcome? And the answer to that, I told him, is yes. We are taking it to the floor this morning. So if we can hold back the committee vote until he checks in and Senator Washington checks in. But as of now, it's 9-0?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Senator.
So I still want to be noted on final passage as a no. So I didn't know I thought we were doing the amendments and then passing it again. Is that not?
Amendments, I didn't know. I guess
I guess I didn't understand the process. I thought we were doing the amendments, but I want to be on record for a no on the final bill. So if that changes the amendments vote, or if you're not doing a final.
unless someone wants to change their vote from the vote we took 2 days ago, that will stand, and you are down as a negative.
Okay.
Okay, then we are adjourned. It's going to come up on the floor today. Thank you all for coming in. I thought there was going to be one other bill, but it's not, so we'll just have our voting session tomorrow. After floor session, it won't go longer than an hour or two. We'll get out of here hopefully by 3 or 4, hopefully. Okay, thank you all.